Who suffers more during no contact? The anxious person or the avoidant person? And why does this question create so much confusion and heartbreak for those caught in this painful relationship dynamic? When an anxious person and an avoidant person stop talking to each other, the silence does not affect them in the same way, even though both may be hurting more than they are willing to admit. The anxious partner usually feels the pain immediately because their emotional connection is activated by closeness, reassurance, and regular communication. When the messages stop, the anxious mind begins searching for answers, replaying conversations, and wondering what went wrong. Every hour of silence can feel like a day, because uncertainty is often the hardest thing for an anxious person to tolerate. They may constantly check their phone, revisit old memories, and hope that the avoidant partner will suddenly reach out. The anxious person often experiences no contact as emotional withdrawal because they were used to finding comfort through connection. As a result, the first stage of no contact usually feels extremely painful and overwhelming for them. Meanwhile, the avoidant partner often reacts very differently during the early days of separation. At first, no contact may actually feel like relief because the pressure, expectations, and emotional intensity are no longer present. The avoidant person may convince themselves that they need space, and that distance is the solution to their emotional discomfort. They often focus on work, hobbies, routines, or distractions rather than directly confronting their feelings. To an outside observer, it can look as if the avoidant person has moved on without any difficulty. This is why many anxious partners assume that the avoidant never cared in the first place. But what is visible on the surface is not always what is happening underneath. Avoidant individuals are experts at suppressing emotions when those emotions feel overwhelming or threatening. Instead of processing pain immediately, they often place emotional experiences into mental boxes and try not to think about them. This coping strategy can create the illusion that they are unaffected by the breakup or separation. However, emotions that are buried are not necessarily emotions that disappear. The anxious person feels everything now, while the avoidant person often feels everything later. This is one of the biggest differences between these two attachment styles during no contact. The anxious partner's suffering tends to be intense, immediate, and impossible to ignore. The avoidant partner's suffering is often delayed, hidden, and difficult even for them to recognize. During the first few weeks, the anxious person may believe they are losing the battle because they are hurting so much. They may wonder why they cannot stop thinking about someone who seems perfectly fine without them. But emotional pain is not always measured by what is visible on the outside. Many avoidants spend weeks convincing themselves that they are happier alone and better off without emotional dependence. Yet as time passes, reality slowly begins to replace distraction. The daily routines that once kept them busy become normal again and no longer provide the same escape. The silence that initially felt peaceful may begin to feel strangely empty. The absence of the anxious partner becomes more noticeable because the emotional connection is no longer available. This is often when avoidants start remembering the positive moments of the relationship. Instead of focusing on pressure or conflict, they begin recalling laughter, support, affection, and companionship. The memories that were pushed away slowly return to the surface. At this point, many avoidants experience feelings they thought they had already escaped. Regret, loneliness, curiosity, and longing can emerge when the emotional threat is no longer present. The anxious partner, however, may already be entering a different stage of healing. After weeks of heartbreak, many anxious individuals begin accepting the reality of the separation. They start investing energy back into themselves, their goals, and their personal growth. Although the pain remains, it gradually becomes more manageable. They learn that survival is possible even without the reassurance they once depended on. Ironically, this is often the exact moment when the avoidant begins feeling the weight of the loss. The timing creates a frustrating dynamic because both people are experiencing different emotional stages at different moments. The anxious person suffers first and heals later. The avoidant person escapes first and suffers later. Neither experience is easy, but the timing makes them appear completely different. Another reason this question is difficult to answer is because suffering itself comes in many forms. The anxious person suffers through fear of abandonment and uncertainty. Their pain is emotional, visible, and often expressed openly. The avoidant person suffers through emotional suppression and disconnection. Their pain is hidden beneath layers of independence and self-protection. One person cries because they feel too much. The other person disconnects because feeling too much scares them. Both are responding to pain, but their coping mechanisms are completely different. The anxious individual often seeks closeness when they are hurting. The avoidant individual often seeks distance when they are hurting. Because of this difference, their behaviors can be easily misunderstood. The anxious partner sees distance and assumes there is no pain. The avoidant partner sees emotional expression and assumes there is too much pain. Both interpretations are often inaccurate. Deep down, both attachment styles are usually reacting to the same fear. That fear is the possibility of losing someone important. The difference is not the existence of pain, but the way pain is managed. Many people ask whether no contact hurts the avoidant at all. The answer is that it often does, but not always in the way people expect. Avoidants may not spend every day crying or constantly checking their phone. Instead, their pain can appear as emotional numbness, loneliness, restlessness, or a growing sense that something meaningful is missing. Because these feelings emerge gradually, they are easier to overlook. Some avoidants do eventually reach out because the absence becomes harder to ignore than the closeness once was. Others continue suppressing their emotions and never fully process the loss. This depends on their level of self-awareness and emotional maturity. The same is true for anxious individuals. Some use no contact as an opportunity to heal and develop healthier emotional habits. Others remain stuck in hope, waiting for a message that may never arrive. The outcome depends less on attachment style and more on personal growth. So, who suffers more during no contact, the anxious or the avoidant? The most accurate answer is that both suffer, but they suffer differently and at different times. The anxious person often experiences intense pain at the beginning. The avoidant person often experiences delayed pain after the distance becomes real. One feels the storm immediately. The other feels the storm after believing it had already passed. Understanding this can help you stop comparing your healing journey to someone else's behavior. Just because someone appears unaffected does not mean they are not struggling internally. And just because you are hurting today does not mean you will hurt forever. No contact reveals more than feelings for another person. It reveals how each person handles fear, loss, vulnerability, and emotional connection. The goal should never be to make someone suffer or to prove who misses whom more. The real purpose is to heal, grow, and build a stronger relationship with yourself. Because in the end, the person who wins during no contact is not the one who suffers less. The person who wins is the one who learns, heals, and becomes emotionally stronger because of the experience.